Forget Lex Luthor. Is Superman's real enemy liberalism?
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Superman. Yes, it's Superman.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, and controlled by the left?
We have plans for you, Peter Parker.
Comic book artists now calling out pervasive liberal bias.
There's a storm coming, Mr. White.
So where are our superheroes? And just what has the left done with them?
The fate of your planet rests in your hands.
And joining us, comic book artist Paul Rivoche and comic book writer Chuck Dixon. I am so glad to have you with me because I read your Wall Street Journal op-ed yesterday, and I thought it was really interesting. And I wanted to ask you, Chuck, if you could start, why do you think this has happened over time?
Well, I mean, sort of a coterie of left-leaning editors have taken over the superhero area of mainstream comics. And you've been writing comic books for years. Do you think that over time, because they used to be the printed comic book version, but now there's the possibility of a Hollywood blockbuster, did people get, maybe the writers got seduced a little bit by Hollywood? No, I don't think so, because the movies, for the most part, don't reflect what's going on in the comics. They're not, there's no radical turn toward any kind of political agenda in the movies, but in the comics there certainly is.
And Paul, have you noticed that too when it comes to just reception to your work?
Sure. I've noticed a really big change since the comics of my youth, and there isn't much of a conservative voicing in mainstream comics. And in the field of graphic novels, it's somewhat the same, although there's a couple of exceptions. And we've just released a graphic novel edition of Amity Schlee's bestseller, The Forgotten Man. It's called The Forgotten Man Graphic Edition. It's a 300-page book that will appeal to conservatives.
Now, Chuck, when you think back to how things started, what do you think really changed in terms of the moral equivalency that now you start to see in some of the superheroes that we didn't ever see before?
Well, I mean, it was obviously an idea they came up with, a direction to take, where the heroes aren't as heroic as they once were, and clearly driven by some sort of a political agenda. And in a lot of cases, critical of American policy or supporting one politician over another, something we never saw in comics before. I mean, comics superheroes have always been apolitical for the most part. They're universal appeal so that they reach the broadest audience. This direction sort of alienates a large part of the audience.
So, Paul, what you were describing with the new book that you have, if you are a comic book enthusiast and you want to try to find that, what's the distribution like? Do you find that there's also some discrimination when it comes to that too?
Do you mean distribution of the graphic novel?
Of the book, yes.
Yes. No, I think that it's readily available on Amazon and the regular outlets. It's just that it's kind of an exception. I think that conservatives haven't realized how wonderful the cartoon medium is. Amity, in her case, was a kind of a visionary, is what I'd call her, because she's embraced the medium. She saw through the fact that usually comic books in North America, they're associated with a particular genre, which is superheroes. But they can do so much more as a medium. And I would say among my artistic peers, a lot of them would be leftward or progressive in their point of view, and they have just embraced the comic book medium.
Paul and Chuck, thank you both for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Dana.
And we have breaking news, election results coming in for House Majority Eric Cantor. Majority Leader, he's in Virginia. There's some big news to report. Carl Cameron's going to come back next.